Our currency is crashing and will soon no longer be the world standard, which will be our greatest defeat, frankly, in 200 years. There will be no defeat like that. That will take us away from being even a great power.
Several people have asked me how I know the American dollar is going down. And the answer is simple. I'm going to tell you one fact. It's an irrefutable fact. It cannot be disputed. Now, 40% of the money that is currently in circulation has been printed in the last 4.5 years. You tell me what that means.
I don't like bullies. Isn't this partly the end of the era of the bully?
I think multipolarity is here. I think that's the key, and the dollar is dying. There is no question about it. Let me give you some figures that are quite important. The GDP of the United States is 24 trillion. The debt, the public debt, is 30 trillion. The difference between the total gross domestic product and the debt is 6 trillion. 6 trillion is equivalent to the combined GDPs of the whole of the Latin American countries together, including Brazil. That gives you an idea of the problem. That's number one. There is a US debt clock, which you can find in the internet. I ran it before coming to the show. And I ran it for 5 minutes. And in those 5 minutes, the amount of debt that increased in the United States was 8 billion. Now, 8 billion is, if you have 3 of them, that is the GDP of Nicaragua. If you have 5 of them, that's the GDP of Bolivia. The United States has a very serious problem with infrastructure. Their productivity is low. The number of bridges in the United States that require urgent repair, not repair, urgent repair, is 65,000. The quality of the road, according to the American Society of Civil Engineers, they produce a report every year, 42% of the roads are mediocre or in need of repair. The electricity plants, airports, and so on, everything is a complete mess. The United States doesn't have high-speed trains. It doesn't. Sorry to say like this. Even Spain has them. So that gives you an idea of the problem. And the United States economy is growing at a rate of something between 2 and 1%. The Chinese economy, with all the problems, is growing at a rate of 7%. So that means in the next 10 years, arithmetically, the US economy is going to be 20% bigger, and the Chinese economy is going to be 70% bigger. Now, if you take what countries have done regarding this question of the dollar, possibly people do not know, but China and Japan are conducting their foreign trade in their currencies. Iran is conducting their business in no dollar. Russia and China, Iraq, and many other countries. But the recent decision by the Saudi Arabia to actually conduct the selling of their oil to China in yuan. Now, China buys 25% of the total output of Saudi Arabia. This is 30 billion. The United States purchases only 7%. So if you keep going down, you can see that there is already a multipolarity of initiatives. What we don't have is the international architecture, financially speaking, so that there is a system which is coherent, is international, it works, it has legal security that gives you legal confidence that if you enter into a transaction in that system, you know, whatever it is going to be respected. That has to happen, but it's beginning to take place already. So the United States is in a real trouble, and it doesn't have any possibility. I just looked at the budget that Joe Biden presented to Congress for 2023. It's a very long document. It has three key components. Number one, domestic security. It's going to give to the police, domestically, huge amount of resources. The organization Black Lives Matter said, this is not what we want. You know what happened when they have resources. And basically, Biden is trying to get votes from the right by doing this. That's number one. Number two is international security. He increased the budget, the military budget, to 773 billion, which is 30 billion more than in the previous administration. And surprisingly, he's going to apply a tax of 20% on the fortunes of 100 million upwards, which is going to produce 360 billion, and it's going to reduce the budget deficit and the deficit of the United States by 1 trillion in 10 years. So it's totally useless. And in order for this budget to be passed, he needs to win it in the House, in Congress. He's got a majority.
Control over which he may well lose in November.
Certainly, but at the moment, if we were to propose it, he will pass it in the House, but he will not be able to pass it through Congress because there is 50-50. And Democrat right-wing, Joe Manchin, already said he's not going to support it. So it's already, not only is useless as a proposal to recover the economy, but it's already dead before it begins. So that gives you an idea of the problems that they have. So the issue, strategically, from their point of view, is this. Do they continue waging war against everybody else? And who else is there to wage war? Their calculation, it seems to me, was if we are able to bully Russia and make them accept our way, and then later on we'll continue with that until, we produce something equivalent to regime change, isolating China thereby, and therefore the next move is to attack China. And this one hasn't worked. The next one is certainly not going to work. So the United States is desperate because it's facing a very serious challenge. Number one, energy and resources from Russia to Europe, which really needs them, and the Belt and Road Initiative by China, which is, at the moment, is in the region of $5 trillion. So therefore, facing with this huge, very attractive embrace from these two nations, have huge resources, one, natural resources, the other one, technology, markets, money, and credit, and investment, infrastructure, is very difficult to say no. So the only possibility for them is war, war, war.
Pre-COVID, we were spending 20%. The federal government was 20% of GDP in spending.
Right.
It's now 25% of GDP. As outlined in the Wall Street Journal editorial this morning, my father told me, if you're in the hole, stop digging, Stan. All right. So I was actually happy to see when the announcement, the support for Ukraine and Israel, $106 billion. And I was waiting to hear what the offset was going to be. Was it going to be entitlements? Where were the cuts going to be? And the next thing I knew, 2 days later, there was not only no offset, there was $56 trillion in emergency spending. I have kids, I have grandkids. Child care is not emergency spending. It's a priority that maybe should be on the table or not. But we are spending like drunken sailors, okay? So
do you agree with the House Republican plan, which puts forth spending for Israel but cuts it in the IRA through funding to the IRS? Is that an appropriate offset in your mind?
Becky, I want to go after entitlements.
Right.
It's where the money is, and
you're not going to solve this.
At some point, it's going to happen. I'm going to give you some numbers to tell you why.
Do that. Yeah.
It's going to happen no matter what. I'd say the one area that I feel reasonably comfortable in is I'm short the United States dollar. Currency trends tend to run at least 2 or 3 years. We had a long one here, over 10 trillion, something like 13 trillion came into the US dollar during the previous decade. I will say, full disclosure, I missed the dollar, probably the biggest miss in my career in currency trades. I missed the last 9 months run up in the dollar. I just couldn't bring myself to own Joe Biden and Jerome Powell. I think now that on a relative basis, the tightening in the U.S. going forward will not be as much as the foreigners now that we've weaponized the dollar, and you've got people like Lula running around asking why we need to be trading in U.S. dollars. By the way, it's not a bad question. Historically, we could be trusted. We had a rule of law, a lot of things. So about the only space I have any risk on right now is in the U.S. dollar. Don't run out in short dollars. I could change my mind in a week. But that's where I am right now, and I'm also long gold, obviously, for the same reasons.
Stanley Druckenmiller, billionaire investor, telling you to short the dollar and long hard assets like Bitcoin. It's time to opt out.
Billionaire investor Stanley Druckenmiller announced last week that he's shorting the U.S. dollar. He's doing this for a few reasons. First, he thinks that economic growth in the U.S. is weakening and that the Federal Reserve will pivot and start cutting interest rates, most likely by the end of the year. Additionally, he thinks that the U.S. is weaponizing the dollar in terms of sanctions with the war in Ukraine. He thinks that not only will the dollar go down, but he's also long gold in this environment. And personally, I also think Bitcoin will do well in this environment with dollar debasement as well as technology stocks.
Just since 2007, federal debt held by the public has surged from $4.6 trillion to an astonishing $27 trillion. Overall government debt is now surpassed $34 trillion. Just look at this chart. In over 200 years of history, we saw this and then boom. China and other BRICS nations saw this coming years ago, so they started dumping US treasuries, unlike Japan. And now they're facing disaster. Now Japan's economy is collapsing. They have no young people. No one is having babies in Japan. The same thing is happening in the United States thanks to Biden's inflation and money printing. That means the government and the Fed have to keep printing money to counter that demographic cliff that's coming. It's about to get a whole lot worse.
The world is dropping the United States dollar. It's dropping the US dollar, and this is why. So just to give a little bit of context, the United States dollar is the world's reserve currency, and it became that after World War II, when at one point the United States GDP made up 50% of the world's economic output, okay? Now, at the time, the United States dollar was actually backed up by a physical commodity like gold, but that hasn't been the case since 1971, when President Nixon actually effectively removed the United States dollar off of the gold standard. And the reason behind that is a whole nother history lesson that I can't really get into right now. Now, since the United States dollar has been removed from the gold standard, what actually gives the United States dollar its value is, one, the trust of the global markets in the United States government, the ability that the United States government can keep and maintain economic stability, and lastly, that the United States government can manage the currency responsibly. All three, which I'm going to show you, that's not the case right now anymore, especially under this administration with Trump. The world globally has no trust in this administration, so they don't have any trust in the United States government. That's one. Globally, the world has begun to lose its faith and confidence that the United States government can maintain economic stability. I mean, they're not wrong. Right now, currently under this administration, we are dealing with massive layoffs. We're facing a recession. We're dealing with inflation. So yeah, the United States dollar is not looking as strong. And lastly, globally, the world would need to have trust and faith that the United States government can manage currency responsibly. And again, under this administration, we have a president that has now enacted this whole global trading war. These tariffs that this administration is imposing, that is essentially making it so much harder for the working class here in America to live, to survive, while simultaneously making sure that all of his multi-millionaire and billionaire friends get the greatest tax break of their fucking lives. Yeah, I could see why the world globally does not trust this administration and the US dollar. Now, I know you guys have heard about the little rumors about China wanting to move away from the US dollar and actually switch over to gold. That's not a rumor. It's actually been in the works since 2022. Here in an article found on asiatimes.com, the title of the article is China's Gold Stockpiling is Dollar Warning Sign, right? And this was actually posted on November 24th, 2022, where it's literally stated that China's banks have begun switching out the dollar and replacing it with gold. If China shifts the yuan to the gold standard, it will, in time, make the yuan more valuable than the US dollar. And as of right now, that's really not too much of a challenge, considering that the United States dollar is only 3 points away 3 points away from hitting a historic low, for it literally being at the lowest value that it's ever been in existence. Everybody is saying that right now, the best thing for you guys to do, for us to do, if we are smart, is to invest in commodities like gold and silver. So now this is where I'm actually going to I'm going to tag one of my mutuals. Her name is Dr. Kelly Doctor, and her entire page is dedicated to teaching everybody how to invest in stocks, how to make money. I need you, Dr. Kelly, to please make us a video, a step-by-step on how to start investing in gold and silver. Many of us who have been participating in the boycotts have actually had, gotten some extra funds, had some extra funds laying around. Some of us have actually cleared up some debt. We have some savings. And right now, if this is the time for us to be investing, we need to strike while the iron is hot. I just don't know how to do it, so I can't relay that information to you. So I'm going to add somebody who does. And hopefully she makes a video step by step. She, and explains to us for dummies. Make it for dummies. Teach us how to invest in gold and silver, because that's what we need to start doing right now.
America is going to be the poorest country in the world starting now. You're going to see the biggest crashes happening right now. So that's good for me because the price of gold and silver go up. So this time I went to the slums of Mumbai. But what shocks most people is America never had slums like that. Today, slums are everywhere across America. The slums of Mumbai are spreading across America. So the big shift is Russia, China versus America, Europe. The Chinese are threatening to shift the yuan to gold. And if they do that, US dollar collapses. If that happens, America goes. So that's why I've been saying it's commodities, silver and gold. So when the dollar crashes, I get richer.
In terms of investment, do the opposite of whatever I'm about to say, because I get it all wrong all the time in the short term, though I'm not bad at the longer term, okay? So I'm going to give you a 10-year answer, not a 10-day answer. The 10-year answer is the dollar will play a far smaller role in the world in 10 years. Not a marginal decline, a big decline. We're going to have a multi-currency world. The renminbi is going to play a much larger role in the world. Local currencies are going to play a much larger role in the world. And the role of the US dollar is going to be tremendously diminished. Why? Because first, technologically, the SWIFT system and the dollar-based system as a just sheer mechanics is nothing to write home about anymore. We will move to digital central bank currencies because that's how settlements will be made far more easily than a SWIFT system. So technically, settlements can be done much more efficiently and digitally, and that will already level the playing field. Second, I think that the share of the U.S. in the world economy will continue to decline. I believe, we didn't talk about it, but I believe that this region will be a region of rapid economic growth for years to come. I think ASEAN will have 5 or 6% growth consistently. China will have 5% growth consistently. Hong Kong will do very well in this mix as playing many critical roles in a very successful region. And the U.S. will grow 1 to 2% per year, and the share of the U.S. in everything will diminish. And also, this tariff policy will not succeed. The U.S. is way behind China on all green technologies. It will be behind China on all digital technologies. Not that there won't be some breakthroughs from the U.S. I'm sure there will be some great breakthroughs in AI or other technologies, but China will mass produce them, demonstrate them, put them into operation on a much larger scale than the United States, and will become the low-cost producer of all of them. So I think that the economics point to a diminishing role of the U.S. economy in the world economy over time, which is to the good because we are right now 4.1% of the world population, and on a purchasing power basis, 14.8% of world GDP. So what I envision in a world of peace is that the developing countries grow faster than the rich countries, and that they catch up step by step over a 30, 40, 50-year period, and that means that the share of everybody goes to their population share gradually, and the U.S. share may diminish to 10% of GDP in 30 or 40 years, not the 14.8% share that it is today. I believe Africa, which is almost a no-show in discussions, will actually achieve significant economic growth in the next 40 years because their technology will enable that kind of rapid growth. In that context, and with large budget deficits likely to continue, fiscal instability, higher interest rates in the U.S. than in China on a long-term basis. China's interest rates will remain much lower as a high-saving region. The U.S. will become more of a credit risk and a savings scarce country. Fiscal policy will not support a strong dollar, and monetary and confidence in the dollar will diminish. And then finally, I don't know when, but the United States is going to so abuse the sanctions that the BRICS really are going to make systematic methods for non-dollar payments soon, within the next couple of years. It's an interesting question, by the way. The U.S. pressure is slowing things because India and Brazil are not as gung-ho as China and Russia and Iran and others on making the non-dollar payments. But it will come, because who wants to rely on the U.S. dollar when the U.S. government really freezes your money or takes your money? And if Europe does something so stupid as to actually try to seize the Euroclear frozen deposits of Russia, that will also not only destroy the euro role, but it will destroy the dollar role as well, because the U.S. is complicit in that. And so all of this is to say, in my view, we're moving to a multi-currency world, but mainly where the renminbi plays a much larger role. I think that that's inevitable, that China makes the currency much more of an international currency. I think Hong Kong is going to be dealing in renminbi-denominated bonds and renminbi-denominated finance much, much more in the coming 10 years. And why not? It's going to be a very effective alternative.
Well, petrodollar is dead. It just doesn't know it yet, but it's dead. The Saudis are cutting deals with the Chinese in yuan right now, using Chinese currency. The Chinese are some of the biggest purchasers of oil. If they're purchasing oil using their own currency, the petrodollar is dead. It's finished. Goodbye. It'll take a little while for the world to purge itself of this, but we are looking at the collapse of the American empire. It's happening right in front of us. And to be honest, it's a beautiful thing. It's beautiful because the petrodollar hasn't brought anything other than greed, American dominance, hegemony. It hasn't been a force of good. The petrodollar is supposed to be, if it's going to be a force of good, it's supposed to be the reserve currency of the world, a force of stability. But the United States has used that to leverage dominance over people, sanctioning people, or in the case of Russia, stealing hundreds of billions of dollars, stealing, theft, straight up theft. No legal justification for it. The United States just stole it because they can. Now, if you're another nation, look at that going, wait a minute, you want us to buy into a system that's supposed to bring stability, but if we do something you don't like, you get to steal all our money. It doesn't work like that. It's finished. Goodbye and good riddance.
I don't understand. I don't know what's going on here. It's lost the plot. It's completely lost the plot.
Economy is vulnerable. 80% of Russian exports are in oil, gas, and minerals. People say, well, the Europeans will run out of energy. Well, the Russians will run out of cash before the Europeans run out of energy. And I understand that it's uncomfortable to have an effect on business ties in this way. But this is one of the few instruments that we have. Over the long run, you simply want to change the structure of energy dependence. You want to depend more on the North American energy platform, the tremendous bounty of oil and gas that we're finding in North America. You want to have pipelines that don't go through Ukraine and Russia. For years, we've tried to get the Europeans to be interested in different pipeline routes. It's time to do that. And so some of this is simply act.
With regard to Nord Stream 2, we continue to have very strong and clear conversations with our German allies, and I want to be clear with you today. If Russia invades Ukraine, one way or another, Nord Stream 2 will not move forward.
If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly, since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control?
We will, I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
The whole thing is a Ponzi scheme. The way the American system worked was a Ponzi scheme predicated on the absolute necessity to have chaos and anarchy, to have conflict in the world that justified the defense-centric spending of America. The military-industrial congressional complex that Dwight D. Eisenhower warned about was alive and well, living and thriving. But it's a Ponzi scheme. It's never about to achieve stability. It's always about the next scam to get people to invest money up. And eventually, your crises bring you to a culminating point at the top, which is nuclear war, because there's nowhere else to go. That's where we were. We were at the tip of the Ponzi scheme. And thank God Donald Trump came in and went, no, I'm not doing that anymore. Screw it. Bam. Knocked the whole thing down. And it's going to be a beautiful thing to watch that Ponzi scheme collapse.
Putin announced this week that Russia will begin using the Chinese yuan for international payments instead of the dollar. Saudi Arabia is also in talks with Beijing to do the same thing. Speaking of Saudi Arabia, meanwhile, they're in talks with Iran as well to consider an economic alliance with China and Russia. And they can even be joining the BRIC countries, which is an acronym for these countries here, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. These countries all have emerging economies. So what happens if our economy and the U.S. dollar are no longer the world's dominant currency? Former Assistant Treasury Secretary and host of the Monica Crowley podcast, Monica Crowley, is here to weigh in. Monica, great to see you this morning. Let's start right there. What happens if these emerging economies move away from the U.S. dollar towards the Chinese yuan?
Well, good morning, Will. It's great to be with you. And it's really hard to overstate exactly how catastrophic the abandonment of the U.S. dollar would be as the world's global reserve currency. Look, since the end of World War II, the dollar has been the safe place to go, and it's been backed up by a couple of things. It originally was backed up by gold, but President Nixon took us off the gold standard, so there's no hard asset backing up the dollar anymore for the last 50 years. But also it's been backed up by the strength and economic power of the United States and the fact that oil has always been traded in dollars. If that were to end, that would mean the end of the U.S. dollar. Look, there's a perfect storm happening right now, Will. The world's reserve currency being that, having that status has been a real privilege, but we've abused the privilege by wholly reckless monetary and fiscal policies over many years, certainly over the last couple of years, which has really devalued the dollar. On top of that, now you do have this perfect storm of Biden's weakness, his war on American domestic energy production, the Ukraine war, and as you point out, because of all of these things, we've got America's America's enemies, led by China, forming a new economic bloc. And all it would take at this point now, because we're at this pivotal moment, Will, is for Saudi Arabia, who has indicated that they're open to this, to say, you know what, we're going to be open to considering other currencies to trade in oil. If that were to happen, there would be a complete implosion of the global economic system, but certainly the American economic system. And if that were to happen, you'd be looking at sky-high inflation, just raging Weimar Republic kind of inflation. If you think inflation is bad now, just wait. But more importantly, we would lose our economic dominance and we would lose our superpower status.
Monica, the world's reserve currency, you said it's a privilege for the United States for the dollar to have been the world's currency. How does that relate to each individual American? How has that changed or impacted or improved our lives throughout the last several decades?
Yeah, I mean, it's given the United States incredible dominance in the world in terms of the economic system and in terms of trade. It's kept prices down. So whether it's energy prices, whether it's your food prices, the entire global economic system is reliant on the safe and secure dollar. But that is no longer true, again, because we've been printing money like crazy and devalued the power of the dollar and the value of the dollar. But on top of it now, again, oil is the critical linchpin of this. If Saudi Arabia decides to join with America's enemies here and start trading oil in different currencies, that is going to undermine the entire global economic system. And here at home, you know what it's going to mean for us? It's going to mean raging inflation, so much worse than anything we have ever experienced, Will. And I'll tell you, they're setting it up so that they can then come to the rescue by introducing central bank digital currencies. If they were to do that, and the United States already has a pilot program, that means the loss of your individual economic freedom, because the government will have total access and control of everything you buy and sell and the ability to turn it off like that.
Ominous warning. I hear you. Saudi Arabia is the tipping point. Oil trading in dollars is the tipping.
The United States will be the crypto capital of the planet and the Bitcoin superpower of the world, and we'll get it done.
Before this cycle, in June of 2021, Donald Trump was saying, Bitcoin seems like a scam. Do you understand what happened with that transformation?
I didn't have a front row seat to that. I think it's clear that Donald Trump embraced crypto and crypto embraced Donald Trump.
About 5 years ago, we asked Charlie Munger, we were sitting right there, what he thought of Bitcoin, and he said, rat poison. Back then, it was about $100+ per Bitcoin. Today, it's 9,000. Is it still rat poison?
Well, probably rat poison squared.
Mr. Speaker, let's make corruption criminal again. 3 days before his inauguration, President-elect Trump launched the Trump meme coin. Trump's partners and some investors based in China pumped up the price, making hundreds of millions of dollars with early selling while the price was high. As they sold, though, the price plummeted. They duped more than 800,000 Americans who collectively lost $2 billion. Welcome to what experts refer to as a rug pull. When I was a criminal prosecutor, though, we had a different name for this. It was corruption. Foreign interests got the best presidency money can buy. Donald Trump got richer, and Americans got screwed. Today, I introduced the Meme Act, which prohibits top federal officials from issuing, sponsoring, or promoting financial assets with criminal and civil penalties. Mr. Speaker, our public offices do not belong to us. They belong to the American people, and they're not for sale. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Trump meme coin is wild. Maybe not for the reason you think it is, though. See, it's not just a scam. It's actually a business model. I'm sure everyone's seen the Trump meme coin. It's the one with his name and face plastered all over it. Shocker. It pumps, it dumps, it's chaos on the blockchain. And the comments about it are often how far down the value is. Here's the thing. Trump makes money every single time the coin is traded. Buy it, he gets paid. Sell it, he gets paid. Lose your shirt, he gets paid. Because the coin is built with transaction fees, and Trump or his affiliated wallets collect a cut of every single one. And so far, that grift has put about $100 million in his pockets in just a few months. So he's making about $25 million a month just from people betting on his name and the people funding it. They're not hedge funds or executives. It's his base, his everyday supporters who believe in him so deeply they can't imagine he'd ever do anything to hurt them. But the data says otherwise. Over 800,000 wallets have lost a combined $2 billion in the Trump meme coin trying to ride this thing out. They believe they were supporting their guy. What they were really doing was handing him money while the value of what they bought evaporated. And that's the game. Trump doesn't care if the price goes up or down. He makes money on movement. So when his sheep lose, he wins.
The most corrupt act in the history of the White House. This is the creation of the Trump meme coin. This is just a backdoor way for anybody with business before the Trump administration to send him millions of dollars in total secret. Trump doesn't disclose who buys the coin. He launders his income from the coin through an unregulated Chinese exchange. He promotes the coin on his social media feeds. In the first minute of trading, one buyer, and what we know is that this was likely a Chinese individual, purchases 6 million coins, sending the price through the roof and immediately making a ton of money for Trump, who makes money off of every transaction. Trump knows who this person is, no doubt, but American citizens do not. All right, January 20th, he's now sworn in, and he fulfilled.
Might be the most corrupt thing ever done by a U.S. president. This week, a foreign government announced that they would make a $2 billion business deal using the Trump family's cryptocurrency coin. I've told you about how Trump has used crypto to enrich himself and his family, including creating his own crypto meme coin and using the full powers of the presidency to boost the crypto industry. But this week, Zach Witkoff, the head of World Liberty Financial, the Trump family's crypto firm, announced that an Emirati state-owned business would make a $2 billion business deal using a stablecoin created by Trump's firm. And before I go any further, Zach Witkoff, the head of Trump's crypto firm, he's the son of Steve Witkoff, the White House envoy to the Middle East. This deal puts the Trump family in direct business with a company owned by a foreign government, business that will net the Trump family hundreds of millions of dollars at a minimum. This deal also creates a formal link between Trump's World Liberty Financial and Binance, a company that's been under government oversight since 2023 when it admitted to breaking federal money laundering laws. The deal was announced at a major crypto conference in the UAE during a panel featuring Witkoff and Eric Trump, Donald Trump's least favorite son. Also on the panel was a guy named Justin Sun, a Chinese billionaire who was charged by the SEC for manipulating the price of his own cryptocurrency. Last November, just 3 weeks after Trump was elected, Justin Sun purchased $30 million in crypto tokens from World Liberty Financial, a purchase which put millions of dollars directly into Trump's pocket. And just 3 months later, Trump's SEC sent a letter to a federal judge asking them to drop the cases against Justin Sun, and they did. And today, Sun is World Liberty's top investor. So let's connect the dots here. A foreign government investing $2 billion into a deal with a company that admitted to money laundering using Trump's personal crypto firm, a firm advised by a charged crypto scammer who's putting money directly into Trump's pocket. This is exactly what authoritarian corruption looks like. Call your member of Congress.
This picture may be hard for a lot of people to believe. On the right, we see that 1 ounce of U.S. gold in 1933 was worth $20.67. On the left, we now see that 1 ounce of US gold is worth roughly $3,334. So you have the same amount of gold with 1 ounce being worth and sold in the market for way more dollars over time. This is because the dollar is being devalued and debased. So that credit card that you have, money's being printed. That student loan that you may have, money is being created and printed. The mortgage that you may have, money is being created and printed. We live in a debt-based society, and because dollars are constantly being printed to fund consumer goods, is devaluing and debasing the currency. This is the critical difference between a store of value and also fiat currency. Stores of value protect your purchasing power.
The only difference between the US dollar and the peso is whereas it takes 20 years to lose your family's fortune in the peso, it takes about 90 years to lose your family's fortune in the dollar. My house in Miami Beach was $100,000 in 1930. It was appraised at $46 million a few years ago. The US dollar will have lost 99.9% of its value over 100 years.
Breaking news. This is really getting worse and worse by the hour. Russia, China, Iran, and Saudi Arabia are now moving away from the US dollar.
The BRICS want local currency trade in their own currencies as the preferred objective. And to a great extent, they've achieved that in important ways. 53% of China's trade is now in yuan. Over 90% of trade between Russia and China is either in yuan or ruble. And other countries are making progress. 80 countries determined in 2023 to move to local currency trade as a matter of policy. So it's not just BRICS, it's also that currency optionality is now a matter of economic and national security, that no country wants the constant threat of dollar sanctions. The Southeast Asian states unanimously agreed to move to local currency trade. They're not in BRICS, although some of them will be next year. 3 of them will be. But, they made that decision in their collective self-interest.
This is big news this morning and a harbinger, maybe, of things to come. And Australia is in the thick of it. We all know that it is global reliance on the US dollar that gives America its power. If nations start trading in other currencies, that is the end of funding for the US and the end of US power. And the end just took another big jump forward. And what is becoming less surprising, Australia is part of the leading pack. Now, we already know that the euro is a strong currency and that nations could switch to it as a global fiat currency. But that has not happened, in part because what the US dollar controls is so massive. It's essentially impossible to make a switch to any other single currency. And the Chinese yuan has been struggling to supplant the US dollar, but it has not made any significant inroads. So what is happening now, and the big news today, is it is probably not going to be a single currency that takes the place of the dollar, but regional currencies. And not just regional currencies, but it will be digital currencies. Earlier, China signed a currency swap agreement with numerous countries, promoting the use of the yuan in international transactions. Australia and Singapore have actively participated in cross-border central bank digital currency, CBDC, projects. Notably, they collaborated on Project Dunbar, along with Malaysia, South Africa, to explore the use of multiple CBDCs for international settlements. This will make it much easier to trade across borders and trade without using the US dollar. And that is the key to today, because specifically, the US stopped aid to South Africa and threatened Australia to change certain laws in favor of the US, and of course erected tariffs on all the other countries involved. So now these countries have a strong incentive to move forward, not with just the CBC, but one that cuts out the US dollar. And Australia moved forward with that today. Now, 100 days ago, I would have said this would take years to solidify and decades for the US dollar to actually lose its prominence. But that was before Trump's first 100 days. Now, I think this could happen in the next couple of years, maybe even sooner. Countries are engaging already in bilateral agreements to use their local currencies, specifically to reduce dependence on the dollar. It is truly the dawning of a new age and a new world order.
BRICS has unveiled bold plans for 2025 focused on de-dollarization. This initiative aims to reduce reliance on the United States dollar in international trade, potentially reshaping global financial dynamics. With new members like Iran and the United Arab Emirates joining the bloc, BRICS is set to enhance economic sovereignty and challenge Western dominance. Could this be the dawn of a new era in global finance? Let's explore. Chapter 1. The concept of de-dollarization. So, what exactly is de-dollarization? In simple terms, it refers to reducing reliance on the United States dollar in international trade and finance. For decades, the dollar has been the dominant currency in global transactions, accounting for approximately 80% of all international trade. This dominance gives the United States significant economic power, allowing it to influence global markets and impose sanctions with relative ease. However, as emerging economies like those in BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa continue to grow and assert their influence, there's a strong push to shift away from this dollar-centric system. Countries within BRICS are increasingly looking for ways to enhance their economic sovereignty and reduce their vulnerability to United States economic policies. One of the main motivations behind de-dollarization is the desire to mitigate risks associated with United States sanctions. Countries that rely heavily on the dollar can find themselves at the mercy of United States foreign policy decisions. For example, if a country is sanctioned by the United States, its access to dollar-denominated transactions can be severely restricted, crippling its economy. By using their currencies for trade, these nations can protect themselves from such external pressures. Additionally, de-dollarization offers an opportunity for more equitable trade relationships among BRICS members. Think of trading directly in rupees, rubles, or renminbi instead of converting everything into dollars first. Chapter 2. Key goals for 2025. Now that we understand de-dollarization, let's explore BRICS key goals for 2025. Brazil is set to take over the presidency of BRICS in January 2025, and they have some ambitious plans. One of their main objectives is to reform the international monetary system, a significant undertaking that could reshape global finance. A crucial part of this agenda is promoting trade using local currencies among BRICS nations. Instead of relying on the United States dollar as an intermediary currency for transactions, countries can trade directly using their currencies. For example, India could buy Brazilian soybeans in rupees instead of dollars. This not only simplifies transactions, but also reduces costs associated with currency conversion. To facilitate this shift, BRICS is working on establishing a cross-border payment system designed to support local currency transactions. This system aims to make it easier for businesses in member countries to conduct trade without needing to convert everything into dollars first. Think how smoother international trade could be if local currencies were the norm. This would significantly lower transaction costs and increase efficiency in cross-border commerce. Additionally, there's talk about creating a new grain exchange focused on agricultural commodities. This initiative is designed to enhance food security among member nations while further reducing reliance on the dollar. By trading agricultural products directly in local currencies, BRICS countries can support each other economically and build stronger ties. If BRICS can successfully implement these goals by 2025, we could see a significant shift in global trade dynamics. It's not just about economics, it's about reshaping power structures in international relations. With these initiatives, BRICS aims not only to challenge the dominance of the United States dollar, but also to create a more balanced and multipolar world economy. Chapter 3. Strategic Initiatives Announced. Let's dive into one of the most exciting proposals from BRICS: the cross-border payment system. This system is designed to allow transactions in member countries' local currencies, which is a game changer for international trade. For years, countries have relied heavily on the United States dollar, but this initiative aims to change that. Envision being able to trade directly in your currency, no longer worrying about conversion rates or extra fees. This payment system will enhance economic cooperation among BRICS nations and streamline trade processes. It could potentially lower transaction costs and make cross-border commerce much more efficient. The goal here is to create a seamless platform where businesses can transact without the hassle of converting everything into dollars. This not only promotes financial independence, but also shields member countries from external pressures, like sanctions or fluctuations in the dollar's value. It's all about building stronger economic ties within the bloc. Now, let's talk about another exciting initiative, the BRICS Grain Exchange. This trading platform focuses on agricultural commodities and aims to enhance food security among member nations while reducing reliance on the dollar for agricultural trade. Driven primarily by Russia, this exchange will facilitate trading in staple crops like wheat, rice, and maize. Chapter 4. Challenges ahead, now. While these initiatives sound fantastic, there are some significant challenges ahead. One of the biggest hurdles is the entrenched role of the United States dollar in global finance. The dollar has been the dominant currency for decades, serving as the primary reserve currency for many countries. This dominance creates substantial barriers for BRICS as they try to establish alternatives. Transitioning to a local currency-based system isn't just a walk in the park. It requires extensive coordination among member nations. Each country has different economic interests and levels of financial infrastructure development. The real challenge lies in convincing businesses and governments to adopt these new systems instead of sticking with what they know: the dollar. Another major challenge is the economic disparities among BRICS countries. Some nations, like Russia and Brazil, are major exporters of agricultural products, while others may be significant importers. This diversity complicates consensus building on initiatives like the grain exchange because each country has its priorities and concerns regarding trade policies. Chapter 5. Potential impacts on global trade. Let's talk about the potential impacts of de-dollarization on global trade. If BRICS nations successfully shift away from the United States dollar, we could see a major shift in trade dynamics, especially in the oil and commodities markets. For decades, oil has been traded predominantly in dollars, creating a consistent demand for the currency. But what if countries like Russia start selling oil in their currencies or alternatives like the yuan? That could change everything. Contemplate a world where oil is traded in rubles, won, or gold-backed currencies instead of dollars. This would not only reduce the dollar's dominance, but also empower countries to engage in trade on their terms. BRICS nations account for about 30% of global oil production, so their collective actions could shake things up. If they successfully implement local currency transactions for oil, it might encourage other producers to jump on board, further diminishing the dollar's status. But it's not just about oil. This shift could enhance emerging market resilience by providing alternatives.
The BRICS alliance has expanded by welcoming 9 new countries as partner nations from January 1st, 2025. Belarus, Bolivia, Cuba, Indonesia, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, Thailand, Uganda, and Uzbekistan. This move increases BRICS's representation to approximately half the world's population and 41% of the global economy. Brazil has taken over the BRICS chairmanship for 2025, focusing on climate change, sustainable development, and AI regulation. All the best to the alliance. World peace desperately needs a stronger BRICS alliance.
Yellow card. The unit reverse. Inflation in the United States is made in Washington and nowhere else. Of course, no government any more than any one of us likes to take responsibility for bad things. And the government is the same way. So it doesn't accept responsibility for inflation. If you listen to people in Washington talk, they will tell you that inflation is produced by greedy businessmen, or it's produced by grasping unions, or it's produced by spendthrift consumers. Or maybe it's those terrible Arab sheiks who are producing it. Now, of course, businessmen are greedy. Who of us isn't? Trade unions are grasping. Who of us isn't? And there's no doubt that the consumer is a spendthrift. At least every man knows that about his wife. But none of them produce inflation, for the very simple reason that neither the businessman, nor the trade union, nor the housewife has a printing press in their basement on which they can turn out those green pieces of paper we call money. Only Washington has that printing press, and therefore only Washington can produce inflation.
Inflation is a government scam. So the definition of inflation is that prices are going up because people are buying too much stuff. So what the government has told us is, in order to combat inflation, they're going to raise interest rates, which means it costs more to manufacture goods and services. And when that happens, the price of goods and services go up and people won't buy them. So what they're saying is they need to raise prices to combat inflation, which is prices going up. And then because employers aren't going to sell as much, they won't need as many employees, and then they can lay people off and there will be less people buying stuff because they don't have jobs. Does anybody else see a serious flaw in this thinking? To combat prices going up, we raise prices, and we lay people off so they don't have jobs so they can't buy stuff. That is your government at work for you.
If President Trump does what he said he would do during his campaign, the inflation shock administered to the economy is substantially larger than anything that happened at the beginning of the last administration. He's vowed huge deficit increases through continuation of his tax cuts and new tax cuts. He has trashed the idea of the independence of the central bank. He said that we should want to have a less highly valued currency, which means less valuable money, higher prices. And that's just on the demand side. The more important part is he's talked about a big tariff on every good that we import, which means higher import prices. So that's substantially inflationary. And it's clearly the right thing to do. It's clearly something we have to do for our polity to tighten the borders. But if you're talking about sending millions of people out of the country who are here now, that's a prescription for large-scale labor shortages. And we've seen in the past what that does to inflation. So if the policies are implemented in the way they have been talked about, it's going to be more inflationary than what we saw before, and that will be very politically toxic and will raise cynicism and disillusionment in the country. There's a lesson there for policymakers going forward.
No cool intro, no fancy music. I just want to explain inflation in 6 minutes. I have a degree in economics. I spent years trying to understand this. So let's see if I can boil it down. What is inflation? Why is it rising? Why are people worried? And what do interest rates have to do with it?
The Federal Reserve is raising the interest rate
to raise interest rates.
Highest inflation in 40 years.
Listen, I know that I make long videos. I'm into nuance, I'm into backstory. Well, this isn't that. This is quick. No, really, this is quick. Let's go. Okay, first up, the simplest definition. Inflation is when there is more money in the economy than stuff to spend it on. But if you're like me, the simplest definition never does it for you. So let's try this. Imagine a village that has one market where people buy all of their stuff, their food, their clothes. But one day the government shows up because they're worried about the economy of this village. So they tell the people that if they want to take out a loan, they're going to make sure that the banks will not charge them a high interest rate. They want to encourage the people to take out loans and spend money. Oh, and they also drop off a giant pile of cash for everyone in the village. And everyone in the village is like, sweet, I'm feeling pretty rich. Villagers now are going to their market and they're buying way more stuff. Many of them have been eyeing the fancy electric bike in the market that before they couldn't justify, but now they totally can because they have all this new money. The store owner's like, sweet, this is great for business, but he's running out of bikes. In fact, he's running out of everything because now all of these people have extra money and they're buying way more than they used to. The store owner's like, I can't keep up with all this demand. I should raise prices. And that is inflation. But the village is all of us, and the market is the entire economy. When there's extra money floating around and people want to spend it faster than businesses can make stuff, then all of the businesses in all of the industries raise their prices, and that is inflation. It's a natural part of the economy. It's kind of a good thing in small doses because it means that the economy is growing, and it's why movie tickets used to be 25 cents and now they're like $15. And slowly over time, it's fine. Okay, let's go back to the village and see what happens if we keep going at this rate. The store owner has now doubled his prices on bikes. The interest rate is super low, so he takes out a loan to build a new factory to make bikes. This is good. He's growing a business. But the government money eventually runs out, and his prices are still double. But now the store owner has no one to come buy all of his new bikes. And now he has this factory and more employees, but no customers. He has to shut down the factory, lay off everyone, and slowly start lowering his prices. This is called recession. When COVID shut down the world, governments gave us money, free money. They're like, don't panic and hoard all your money. Instead, spend and borrow and keep the economy going. Here in the US, they literally sent us $3,200 checks. They gave $600 a week to people who were unemployed for months and months and months. They gave subsidies to people with kids. They increased spending on food stamps. I mean, trillions and trillions of dollars of stimulus money. This was vital aid to people in need. But even people who didn't lose a job got a check in the mail. It was free money for everyone. And we spent it.
I just picked up myself a new bike. Demand is up across the country.
It's time to grind, Peloton.
We all just got these big checks from the government. During a pandemic, we're like, YOLO, I'm buying a boat or a Peloton or whatever.
Pokemon cards.
There's Netflix.
Fortnite.
A new motor.
Peloton. Soak in a hot tub. Animal Crossing.
Push it out a little bit so it fits.
No, don't you dare!
But pair all this new spending with the fact that the pandemic also made it harder for factories and ships and retailers to get us all this stuff.
Supply chain issue.
Global supply chain.
Supply chain. Supply chain!
So now you have an economy where people have way more money than normal and they're ready to spend it, but the economy can't get them stuff fast enough. So what do businesses do with all this insane new demand? They raise prices all at the same time, and that is inflation. I feel like we're getting this at this point. But what do interest rates have to do with all this?
Raising the interest rate.
Interest rate.
Or the Fed.
Federal Reserve.
The Federal Reserve.
Most countries have a central bank, the puppet master of the economy, the bank of all banks for that country. But it's not like a normal bank that stores our money and then lends it out and collects interest to make profit. That's what a normal private bank does. The central bank, which we call the Fed here in the US, is run by the government. So their job is to set the rules or policies that all the other banks have to follow. And the central bank isn't motivated by profit, but rather their job is to babysit the economy, to keep it growing, to make sure people have jobs, to make sure that prices don't fluctuate too much so that we can keep growing nicely. No slowdown, no recession. That is what the Fed is there for. But seriously, the Fed is like a puppet master, and we are the puppets, and it's kind of creepy. They pull strings in the economy to get us to spend our money in a certain way, which in turn affects how much businesses raise or drop their prices. And guess what? It totally works. One of the strings that they have to pull in the economy is called the interest rate. Want to borrow money to buy a car or a house or expand your business? You're going to be way more likely to do that if you only have to pay 2% interest on that loan as opposed to like 6%. Lower interest rates equal people and businesses want to borrow and spend money. So during the pandemic, the central bank was like, we need everyone to spend money. So they lowered the interest rate and people borrowed and people spent, and it totally worked. We're like freaking puppets. So a low interest rate helps stimulate the economy. But once again, we're in this same place where there's now too much money to borrow and spend and not enough goods and services to spend it on. So what do businesses do all at the same time? They raise prices to meet all this new demand all at the same time. And now your money is worth less, and that is inflation.
Home prices rising at their highest
Astronomical
rate.
bidding wars.
Rents are going up by nearly 24%.
So that's what's happening right now. All the prices are rising kind of at the same time. What that means is that your $100 bill is now worth 8% less than it was last year. Like the same money is worth less because your purchasing power just got diluted. And imagine if that keeps happening. Like instead of 8%, it's 50%. Now your $100 bill is worth what $50 used to be. And that's when people start to freak out. And our economy that's built on human psychology starts to falter, and we fall into a recession or a depression even, if it gets real bad, which is exactly what the Fed is built to avoid. So they're back to pulling their strings, and they've started raising rates.
The Federal Reserve is raising interest rates.
The Federal Reserve taking action to try and curb rising inflation.
They're gently raising the interest rate to cool down all of this hardcore spending and borrowing. See if they can steer the ship back on course, and let's hope it works. Okay, did we do it? Did we do it in the time period that I promised I would? I have no idea. We'll find out.
It's a paradox. Inflation is dropping, but prices aren't coming down. How can this be? Because corporations have enough monopoly power to keep them high. Here's just one example that'll make you fizz. Pepsi. In 2021, PepsiCo, which makes all sorts of drinks and snacks, announced it was forced to raise prices due to higher costs. Forced? Really? The company reported $11 billion in profit that year. In 2023, PepsiCo's chief financial officer said that even though inflation was dropping, its prices would not. Pepsi hiked its prices by double digits and announced plans to keep them high in 2024.
Consumers generally look at our products and say, you know what, they are worth paying a little bit more for.
How can they get away with this? Well, if Pepsi were challenged by tougher competition, consumers would just buy something cheaper. But PepsiCo's only major soda competitor is Coca-Cola, which, surprise, surprise, announced similar price hikes at about the same time as Pepsi, and also kept its prices high in 2023. The CEO of Coca-Cola claimed that the company had earned the right to push price hikes because its sodas are popular. Popular? The only thing that's popular these days seems to be price gouging. We're seeing this pattern across much of the economy, especially with groceries. Inflation is down. You see, the rate of inflation measures how quickly prices are rising. Prices are now rising far more slowly than in the past couple of years. And while supply chain disruptions really did make it more expensive to produce a lot of goods for a while, the cost to produce them now is rising more slowly than prices, allowing most corporations to keep their profit margins near a 10-year high. They can get away with overcharging you because they have monopoly power. Or so few competitors, they can easily coordinate price increases. If Pepsi and Coca-Cola had lots of competitors, they wouldn't be able to raise prices so high because someone would make cheaper substitutes, and consumers would buy those instead. But Pepsi and Coke own most of the substitutes. This isn't just happening with Coke and Pepsi. Take meat products. At the end of 2023, Americans were paying at least 30% more for beef, pork, and poultry products than they were in 2020. Why? Near monopoly power. Just 4 companies now control processing of 80% of beef, nearly 70% of pork, and almost 60% of poultry. So of course, it's easy for them to coordinate price increases. And this goes well beyond the grocery store. In 75% of US industries, fewer companies now control more of their markets than they did 20 years ago. So what can we do? Well, it's largely flown under the media radar, but the Biden administration is taking on this monopolization with the aggressive use of antitrust laws. It's taken action against alleged price fixing in the meat industry, which has been a problem for decades. It's suing Amazon for using its dominance to artificially jack up prices, one of the biggest anti-monopoly lawsuits in a generation. It successfully sued to block the merger of JetBlue and Spirit Airlines, which would have made consolidation in the airline industry even worse. But given how concentrated American industry has become, there's still a long way to go. Inflation is down, but many people don't feel it because prices are still high, and in some cases are still rising because of continued price gouging. This is where you have more power than you might think. You might not be able to break up big corporations, but you can keep up the pressure on our government to fight corporate monopoly power. And help spread the truth by sharing this video.